السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أسعد الله صباحكم بكل خير. من صرح العلم والمعرفة من جامعة السلطان قابوس، يسعدنا جميعا أن نرحب بالسيد فرانك دي وينه رئيس المركز الأوروبي لرواد الفضاء على تكرمه اليوم بالحضور، شاكرين ومقدرين جهوده الدائمة في التعاون الإقليمي والدولي لما فيه خدمة العلم والمعرفة. من منظور الاستدامة، قامت جامعة السلطان قابوس ممثلة بمكتب التعاون الدولي وشركة بيئة بالتعاون مع فيتو، وفيتو هي منظمة البحوث التكنولوجيا الرائدة في أوروبا، وطبعا هي مستقلة في مجالات التكنولوجيا النظيفة والتنمية المستدامة لتنظيم هذا الحدث المهم اليوم. تأتي هذه المحاضرة كجزء من أنشطة مكتب التعاون الدولي لبناء جسور مع مؤسسات متنوعة الخبرة في جميع أنحاء العالم، وكجزء من الخطة السنوية لجلب المتحدثين من جميع أنحاء العالم لتبادل خبراتهم وفتح آفاق جديدة لجامعة السلطان قابوس، وطبعا إتاحة الفرص للباحثين للتعاون على مختلف سبل في جبهات متعددة. أما من ناحية الشركة العمانية القابضة لخدمات البيئة بيئة، فالشركة تتبنى استراتيجية الاستدامة في مجال النفايات وفي مجال عدة مثل إعادة تدوير النفايات والعضوية وإنتاج الطاقة، لنتمكن جميعا من الاستفادة من الموارد حولنا بطرق عديدة. ويأتي هذا التعاون ما بين الجامعة وبيئة إيمانا بأن حماية البيئة والاستدامة موضوع اهتمام لمستقبلنا جميعا. Your Highnesses, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Murtada Lawati. I head the Corporate Affairs Division at BIA. On behalf of Sultan Qaboos University and BIA, I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to astronaut Frank de Winne, head of the European Astronaut Center, for being with us today to discuss the new space economy, Earth's observation, and the content of sustainability. We'd also like to express our thanks to Vito for putting this lecture together. Vito is a prime research and technology consultancy organization headquartered in Belgium and active on 4 continents, and they actively support the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals by applying knowledge and technology innovation to fields of energy, water, air, circular economy, to name just a few. Walter, thank you very much for putting this together for us. The lecture, of course, comes as part of the activities of the Office of International Cooperation at SQU to build bridges with international institutions from around the world, and as a part of the annual plan to bring speakers from around the world to share their experiences and open new horizons for students and the academic body both in Sultan Qaboos University and in the country on a whole. And of course, to provide opportunities for researchers to cooperate on various avenues and on multiple fronts. The Oman Environmental Services Holding Company, BIA, the company adopts a sustainability strategy in the field of waste management in several areas, such as organic waste recycling, production of energy from waste, just to mention a few. Of course, these are all there to enable us to benefit from the resources that we have around us in a sustainable and economical way. The collaboration between SQU and BIA stems from the faith that protecting the environment and sustainability is a key factor in how we can preserve our Oman for future generations. The lecture, of course, is going to be in English. We'll have a question and answer session at the end of the lecture. Please introduce yourself and then ask the question, and try limiting the question to 1 question per person, please, as time is going to be short. But without further ado, please help me in welcoming astronaut Frank de Winne.
His Excellency, Your Highness, dear students, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk to you today about space exploration. But it's a little bit more than only space exploration, of course. Space today is part of our day-to-day life. We use it when we drive a car with GPS for navigation. We use telecommunication satellites when we look to weather predictions. We use it from meteorological satellites, and it will become only more and more important. And as was said, for example, during the introduction with our colleagues from Vito that are here today, we will also use remote sensing to make better use of our resources on our planet, to make sure that we can have a sustainable development of everybody that lives here on Earth. And it's a message that will come back several times, I think, during the lecture that I will give to you, because it's really important that all together we use every ingenuity, all the capabilities that we have in young people like you, all your brains, your imagination, to bring forward solutions for a better sustainable world. But today I will talk also a little bit about space exploration, and more particularly about the International Space Station. And if we can have the view graph up, please, if you can switch. Yeah, thank you. So today, the International Space Station is a cooperation between all these agencies. It's Canada on one side, ESA, the European Space Agency. We have 22 member states in Europe, part of the European Space Agency. JAXA, which are our Japanese colleagues, NASA and Roscosmos. And there you already see one big aspect of space and space exploration, is that we do it in cooperation. No nation alone on the planet is still capable today to explore space by itself. We can only explore space when we work together. And this is also a very strong message that is coming forward out of the ISS. Today, as we all know, there are quite a lot of tensions in the world, even amongst those partners between the US and Russia, for example, today. Well, it's maybe not at the best possible way that they can work together. But nevertheless, 2 months ago, I was in Baikonur and we launched a Russian cosmonaut, an American astronaut and a European astronaut together in one single vehicle to space. So we're capable today to operate the International Space Station day by day. Thousands of people around the world are working together even when the situation is not so easy. So would it be possible to dim the lights a little bit for the movie? That I think it would be much better than to see for the students, if that could be a possibility. So these are the thank you very much, and also the spotlight, please, if it would be possible. So here you see the agencies that are working together in this. What you will see here are the logos. This was the space station when I arrived on board of the ISS. The logos that we had during expedition 20 and 21. You see 6 stars. 6 stars, it symbolizes 6 people that are living permanently on board the International Space Station. So today, 6 people are living and working in space for the benefit of science, of engineering, or for technology. The day of the launch, of course, these are our launch vehicles. This is the Soyuz rocket that, for which I flew to space. The shuttle is not flying anymore. So today, the only way to arrive at the space station is with our Russian colleagues in this nice Soyuz vehicle. The days of the launch, a lot of smiling faces. The training takes about 2.5 years. To train for a mission to the ISS, for a 6-month mission to the ISS. So the day that you can finally depart and that your training is over, you're of course very happy. This is Nicole. She came to join us for also 3 months on board of the ISS. If you see the launch vehicles, after 8 minutes, you're in space. 8 minutes to propel you to 28,000 kilometers per hour, 8 kilometers per second. If you see there, where on the right side, on the Soyuz, the American flag, this is where the crew is sitting. All the rest are only engines and fuel that are required to propel you to the speed of 8 kilometers per second. Here we see Nicole. She's looking at her new home, soon-to-be new home, the International Space Station. This is our very little tiny Soyuz capsule. It's really very tiny. You sit in there for 2 days with 3 people, and of course you see smiling faces when you finally then arrive in your new place. This is Bob Tursk, my Canadian hero. He was with me on the mission for 6 months, and Bob started smiling when he entered the space station, and he stopped smiling when he left the space station. A lot of smiling faces. You live in a very confined environment. Imagine that for 6 months you're living with the same people in a very, very small place that is a lot smaller than this auditorium here. Of course, you're very happy if from time to time people come and see you. Now, these people that come and see you, they're not the specialists of the space station, so sometimes they leave a little bit of a mess behind, so you're also very happy when they leave again and you can start cleaning up. Here, these are the most difficult tasks on space. It are spacewalks. A suit like this weighs 200 kilograms. It's a small spaceship in itself. You're in this suit for about 10 hours, locked up in the suit. It's under high pressure because, of course, it needs to provide you oxygen and pressure when you're outside. So this is why you see that the movements of the astronauts are difficult and slow, because you have a suit that is very heavy and under pressure. And you also have a psychological pressure because you are on a very strict timeline. We have a lot of tasks to do during an EVA, during a spacewalk, and you have limited resources. After 6 to 7 hours, your oxygen resources are used up, so you have to come back in. So you have to do all these tasks in a very, very precise and accurate way. It's also dangerous because there is still space debris, there is radiation, so we are very happy when we can get the crew back into the space station. And that's also why we try to limit the number of EVAs as much as possible. We try to use as much as possible robotics. Here you see the Canadian robotic arm that has installed a platform at the outside of the Japanese module. And here you see a payload, for example. We use a lot of payloads for Earth observation in order, for example, also to study climate change. So here you see with the robot arm from the inside of the space station that we can move it. If we talk about international cooperation, this is the Japanese cargo vehicle that flew for the first time to the ISS when we were arriving. You will see on the next picture here on the right, the robot arm that is grappling this cargo vehicle in the midst of space. We had 99 seconds to grapple that vehicle. The robot arm is from Canada. The vehicle is from Japan. Nicole, she was an American astronaut. She was operating the robot arm. I was, as a European, operating the vehicle and the space station. We had a safety officer from Canada, and the commander was a Russian commander. And the module was docked to an Italian node. So you see that international cooperation is something that is day-to-day work for people on the ISS. It's not a piece of paper, it's not a declaration somewhere in a conference. It's something that thousands of people around the world are working to make this a possibility. The other things that we have to do on board of the ISS is logistics. Of course, if you live and work there for 6 months, you need food, you need water, you need resources, you need spare parts, you need new scientific experiments. So it's a very important part of our daily operations. We have about 7 vehicles that arrive per year to the space station that we have, of course, to unload, as you see here. This is weighing about 200 kilograms. This is a new scientific rack that then we will have to outfit on board of the space station. You can see that sometimes in space it's a little bit easier to do cargo transfer than here on the ground. This was our American food containers that we were transporting. We have here the Russian vehicle that is arriving. Our Russian colleagues can manually dock the vehicle, so it's not like on the US side where you grapple a cargo vehicle in the midst of space. It's actually flown into the space station and docked to the space station. And here you see some of those videos of Max that is operating the vehicle, and here you see it's very slowly arriving and docking to the ISS. We very much like the Russian vehicles because the ground crew has still access a couple of hours before the launch, so they can actually put some fresh food into the vehicle, an orange, an apple, something like that, because otherwise the food on the space station is only food that is conserved. Here you see the most important part of our work is science. Nicole is here working on a mice drawer. We had 6 mice on board of the space station to do research on osteoporosis. Astronauts lose a lot of bone mass in space. We lose about 10% of our bone mass because of microgravity. And this is also a disease that is touching a lot of elderly women. In Europe alone, for example, osteoporosis has a cost for society of 2 billion euros per year. And so by doing research on mice, we can also try to find cures for that disease. There you saw me working with a t-shirt of UNICEF in WASH. We were supporting with ESA the WASH campaign of UNICEF, water, sanitation and hygiene. Unfortunately today in our world about 1 billion people, 1/7 of the population, 1 billion people do not have regular access to clean drinking water. This is a real problem, and water is only becoming more and more a scarce resource. So we're doing a lot of research in the ISS and in the exploration program to see how we can better use and reuse water. On the ISS, for example, we recycle 70% of the water. is recycled. Also our urine, for example, in the ISS is recycled. It means that the coffee that we drank yesterday is the same that we drink today and the same that we will drink tomorrow. So it's something to get used to, because you also drink the coffee from your crewmates. So it's a very interesting concept. Here you see some satellites that fly information, very important as well. Of course, this was a technology demonstrator, but in Belgium, for example, we are now developing 2 satellites that will fly information, and one will fly in front of the sun, the other one will fly just behind, so we can study the corona, because space weather, the influence of the sun on our systems in orbit that, as I said, are part of our daily life, will become more and more important. Here we see plant growth, for example. We also do a lot of research in biological systems. If one day we want to go to Mars or to the moon for sustainable exploration, we will have to recycle even a lot more. So we will have to close the complete loop together. So for that we will need biological systems, and we will also need to be able to grow our own food. So this is why we are doing this plant research on orbit. And here Bob is laughing as always. Roman demonstrates our freezer. It's a -80-degree freezers. Astronauts, of course, are not the scientists. The scientists are on the ground in the laboratories, and we take samples on board of the ISS, and we freeze the samples at -80 degrees, and then they are brought back down to the labs where the scientists can see them. This is another activity that the crew has to do. It's exercise, sports. If we would not do exercise, we would lose a lot of muscle mass, and we would even lose a lot more bone mass. And so you see here Tim, for example, working on our advanced resistive exercise device. It's like in the fitness. You see me there 90 degrees on top of Nicole, because of course there is no gravity, so you can exercise in any direction. You don't need a saddle when you bike, you float on the bike, but when you run here like Nicole, you need a harness to keep you on the treadmill to make sure that you can really exercise. But here Max is demonstrating that indeed you can take a rest if you want to. In microgravity it's much easier than here on the ground. And Tim is demonstrating that exercises that are very useful here on the ground are not so useful in space, so you have to be careful how you exercise. But this picture illustrates that even though that we live and work in microgravity, with 2.5 hours of sports per day, we are able to maintain very healthy. Nicole takes us here through a tour to the ISS. This is the Japanese lab with the Canadian flag, because Bob was staying there for 6 months. Here our European module Columbus. It's the contribution of Europe to the International Space Station. The Columbus module has about 10 mini laboratories. It's one of the labs that is most used on board of the ISS, so we're very proud of it. We do research in material science, in fluid science, in biology, in human physiology, protein crystal growth, so all these types of material research. So all this research is done on board of our Columbus module. Here we transfer through this little tunnel into the Russian part of the space station. The first element was launched 20 years ago, and we want to maintain the space station at least another 10 years. So you can see that the systems that were developed and that were used in the ISS have to be very robust to live and be operable in this harsh environment for 30 years. And we go a little bit further, we will see that Max takes us here in the command module of the Russian segment, and you will see a lot of cameras on the left and on the right. These cameras we use for Earth observation. It's another task that the astronauts do, is permanently observing our Earth. We do this again for 2 reasons. One is the reason for science, and the other reason is for psychological support. You see very beautiful pictures, but if you look here, this is our planet, the black, and then you see this very, very thin blue line between Earth and space. This is the thickness of our atmosphere. If you talk to our astronauts, to everybody who flies to space, and you will see here another picture from Nicole, you see the hurricane, and then just this very, very thin blue line. All the astronauts that fly, the first impression they say that they have when they look outside the window is how beautiful, but also how fragile, how vulnerable our planet is in this immense cosmos. And so this thin line of atmosphere, this really very small shell, is protecting us, is giving us life. And we all know that today, as humanity, we are not very good with preserving our planet. We really need to put a very big emphasis and focus on better sustainability and sustainable growth and not polluting our planet. The other part is psychological support. As I said, there you saw Houston. So the fact that you can still overfly Earth, even though that you're far away, but you can still overfly your own country, you can see your hometown. Of course, that gives you still a sense of proximity with the planet, and that is a very good psychological support. This is an island from a neighboring country that you know very well, and the next island is not a man-made but a very beautiful island as well. This is Venice with the Grand Canale in Europe. We also live and work in space, so that means that things that we have to do here on the ground also we need to do in space. So we have to go to the hairdresser from time to time. Of course, we don't have a good hairdresser, so you can see that we don't have a lot of confidence in them. Team building is extremely important if you want to work as a team. So Nicole wanted to be part of the team, so she also had a haircut in space. Jeff also, he has no hair, so he also had a haircut. And of course, team building, working as a team, being as a group together is important. That's also why food, for example, is so important in space. It's something that transcends all the cultures. We are living there with Japanese, Russians, Americans, but in every country that you go, if you meet people around a dinner table and you eat together, immediately you start understanding each other. So this is why having common meals with the entire crew is also a very important factor in the team building and in the operations of the ISS. Here we see parties. We also have to relax from time to time. If you want to work very hard, your mind also needs to relax. So this was Halloween. We didn't have a pumpkin, but we had an orange at least coming up with a Russian vehicle. And Tim is demonstrating that Spider-Man really does exist. This is the moment that I became the commander of the International Space Station. It was the first time that a non-Russian, non-American astronaut could become the commander of the ISS. And this has, of course, to do with the investment that Europe has made over the last 20 years in human spaceflight. As you have seen, we now have our own module, our own science module on board of the ISS. We have our own control centers. We have our own training center, our own medical support to our astronauts. So all of that has made that we are now a full partner of the International Space Station, and that we could also have the position of the ISS commander on board of the ISS. Here is the day of the departure. It's a little bit sad if you have to leave this wonderful laboratory behind. You have been working with thousands of people around the world that have helped you, supported you in doing science and doing technology demonstration and doing innovation. And it's a very beautiful, as you have seen, a very beautiful view outside of the window. If this has been your home for 6 months, you can understand that it's a little bit sad to leave it behind. On the other hand, of course, real life is here on Earth. Your family is here, your wife is here, your kids are here, your friends are here. So you're also very happy that you can come back to them, that you can hold them in your arms again, and that you can be again reunited. So it's a little bit a dual aspect when you have to leave the space station. This is the last picture of the crew with which I spent 187 days on board of the ISS. On the top left, you have Roman Romanenko. He's my Russian Soyuz commander. He's really a great person. He can do everything in space from the first time. It's really incredible. Great sense of humor. We told some stories yesterday at the table. Even again, the aspect of joining dinners together is always very nice. His father was a cosmonaut as well, so he's a second generation cosmonaut. So it's really a wonderful person to be there. And I always thought that Roman was born in space. On the top right, Bob Tursk, my Canadian hero. He has helped me so much during the entire space flight. As you have seen, he was always smiling, always laughing, always in good humor, always brought the crew to the next level to do all our tasks. So it was a real great pleasure to have him. And a lot of the pictures and videos that you have seen here were taken by Bob. And on the bottom, myself, it was just a big pleasure and a great honor, Your Excellency, Your Highness, to be able to talk in front of you and in front of the students today. Thank you very much. So, and as we said, I think we have now time for question and answers. You can ask questions about the space flight, you can ask questions about space in general, you can ask questions about future exploration of space, anything that you like. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have, first of all, I'm Khawla Al-Kindi. I'm very honored and happy to attend this session. My question is, why do you launch the spaceships from certain areas, not from Russia, not from America, but rather from like Afghanistan or Pakistan?
Yeah. So indeed, the spaceships today, the Soyuz is launched from Kazakhstan. It has an historical reason. Because of course the launch sites were built in the time of the Cold War. And so in that time it was USSR, so Kazakhstan was part of the USSR at that moment, so it was part of the country. Secondly, why was it there? Because it's in the desert, so it was secret, so nobody could see it. So that is the second part. Thirdly, why was it so much in that region to the south? The more you are in the south of the planet, the more you go to the equator, the higher the speed is already that you have, because the Earth turns around itself. So you have already the rotational speed of the Earth. So it's much more difficult to launch a rocket from the North Pole than to launch a rocket from the equator. That's why the European launch base, for example, Kourou, is very close to the equator, because you have already a lot of speed there. At the USSR, of course, they didn't have territory that went all the way down to the equator, so they went as much far down as they could already, still having the secrecy, and this is why the initial launch was done from Yuri Gagarin. Also the Sputnik, by the way, which is now, just 60 years ago. That Sputnik was launched today, actually on the 4th of October, was launched also from Kazakhstan, and we actually using today still the same launch pad as Yuri Gagarin. This is launch complex number 1, and I launched twice from the same launch pad as Yuri Gagarin. So I can be a little bit proud that I was also part of that part of history.
Yeah, thank you. It was very interesting. My name is Halima. Just I want to ask you if anyone can become trained in your institute, how the process, from other countries, like for example, from our country. Thank you.
Yes, today I would not say it's impossible, but it's a little bit difficult today because we have the 5 partner countries, for example, for the ISS, and they contribute to the exploitation of the ISS, and through this exploitation you acquire rights to fly your astronauts to the International Space Station. There were programs in the past, because there were opportunities which our Russian colleagues where indeed some spaceflight participants flew to the ISS. There was a Malaysian astronaut, a South Korean, also some private people flew to the ISS. When I was there, Guy Laliberté from Cirque du Soleil, he came and visited us. You saw him on the video with the red nose. He was a clown in his former career. But for the moment, there are not such opportunities anymore. However, we are going more and more to commercial exploitation of the ISS. This is what we are trying to do. In the US, they are now SpaceX and Boeing are providing commercial vehicles, and within that concept, we want to open up the ISS to much more partners. We want other people in the world to start benefiting from the International Space Station. So how we are going to do that, it's not clear yet. There are a lot of discussions going on. But what I could suggest, at least to people that want to participate in the ISS program, is to have a sustainable ISS program. It's not very good to have just an astronaut flying for once and then you come back and then what you do. You need to bring from the ISS a program of science, of technology research, of a sustainable long-term vision that you want to engage in inspiration. In Europe, we have just defined our exploration strategy, and we have 4 drivers. One driver is knowledge. science. The other one is innovation. The third one is international cooperation. And the fourth one is inspiration. So inspiration is part of what I'm doing here today. Try to inspire young people to choose for science, technology, engineering, and to really help bringing our planet to the next level. And so we very much encourage, as the European Space Agency, that other nations would also start engaging in a sustainable exploration program. And there are different fora to do that. And so if Oman at one stage want to become part of the international exploration endeavor, I will for sure be one of your advocates, and I can for sure help you and your country to become part of this international endeavor.
Hello. First of all, this is a dream coming true. I've always wanted to see you in person. I'm shaking, sorry. I want to ask you about how do you feel when you first saw the space and the whole world from up there, like how it made you feel? Thank you.
Yes, again, very good question. So it makes you feel very humble, very small, because if you look from above, you see that our planet, our Earth, is actually a very, very, very tiny dot in an immense universe. We are just one little planet that's turning around a very little sun that is somewhere at the outskirts of our Milky Way, that is parts of billions of stars in our Milky Way and parts of billions and billions of galaxies. So we are extremely, extremely small. And when you fly to space, you really realize that. So it makes you very humble. Second is what I said before, is the fact that when you fly from space, you see how vulnerable our planet is, how vulnerable, how thin the atmosphere is, and it makes you realize that really as humanity, we need to do something to make this planet sustainable. Otherwise, we will not be able to live here all together for a very long time anymore. And the third thing is, and we discussed it already a little bit with Her Highness just before coming here, the fact that when you look down from space, there are no borders. Borders do not exist if you look from space. Borders are just imaginary lines that we have drawn on a map, maybe 500 years ago, some 400 years ago, some 100 years ago, some 50 years ago. But in reality, if you look from above, they do not exist. It's impossible to discern any single country. I cannot say from space, oh, there is Belgium. I can see a little bit Europe because I see the coastal lines and I see the environment, but I cannot say these are the borders of Belgium. It's impossible. They do not exist. And yet, for some reason, around the world, we are all fighting around these imaginary lines that somebody has drawn up 500 years ago. So I really want to plea as well in every conference that I do that we should try to work more together. We should try to find solutions and not to fight with each other. And I think the International Space Station, where you have these 5 nations working together for doing science, doing advancement of knowledge, is a very good example how we can do that.
Good morning, Dr. Lemmy Al-Haj from College of Science. First of all, I think the best thing I did this week is to cancel my lecture and bring all my students here. So there's 50 students, and I promised I'm going to take the attendance. So section 30, hands up. Thank you. Okay, so these are the future biologists, inshallah, and just in really short, what advice would you like to give them?
The biology.
Yeah.
So, well, first of all, they have a great future. That is one thing that I want to say, because we will need to have a lot more biologists in the future. We are here also with V2, the institute that is also working around food security, for example, use of resources, recycling. And if you want to recycle in a safe way, we will need a lot of biologists. Because one thing is recycling food from waste, but you need to make sure that whatever then is produced is safe and that you can still eat it. So food security, for that we need a lot of biologists. I think the battery is a little bit slow, I think. That is one. Secondly, also in space, we will need a lot of biologists. As you have seen, we will need to recycle more and more also in space. Today in Europe, for example, we are working around the Melissa program, which is a program to close a complete loop. So using all the waste that is produced by humans, being solid waste, liquid waste, breathing out CO2, and recycle all this waste into usable products that you can then eat again, that you can breathe again, pure oxygen, and so on. So for that, of course, we need a lot of biologists as well. But space exploration is only a very small domain, but food security and having food provided to 7 billion people in a very good way is something for which we will need a lot of your students. So thank you very much for choosing those careers, and you will have a bright future.
Hello. My name is Zaki Ioannou. I'm an astrophysics professor here at the physics department of Sultan Qaboos University. Thank you very much for the inspiring talk. My students are also here somewhere in the audience. What I was wondering about is astronomy, astrophysics is the most popular minor in our department. We have a large amount of students. So we were wondering if our students can get involved. Do you have any actions or activities at the Astronaut Space Center in Europe or European Space Center in general where the students can get involved? And also thank you very much for all the work you're doing. I am very much aware of how difficult it is.
No, the life of an astronaut is not so difficult. It's the life of the people on the ground that support the astronaut, which is much more difficult, I can assure you. But in terms of astrophysics, personally, of course, human spaceflight is not a good platform to do astrophysics. We are not. This is one of the domains where we are not involved in at all, because the space station itself, it's not a very stable platform to start with. Secondly, there is a lot of light pollution on the space station from all the cameras and all the spots that we have around the space station. So we are not using the space station for astrophysics. This is one thing. We use it a little bit for solar research. We had actually a Belgian experiment that was on the outside of the space station for about 8 years. I must say, which had very, very good results on solar activity, because of course there you have the bright light of the sun, which overshadows everything. In terms of getting engaged with ESA, well, the best thing is, of course, to go to our ESA website. I know that we have a science program which is very much open to international cooperation. Our science program is the core program of ESA. It's a mandatory program. Every member state of ESA is obliged to participate in the science program. And the scientists, as you know very well, are working together across the world. So if you have interest in either using the science data, because all the science data to start off is free. All of your students can use all the science data that ESA is producing. That is one. Secondly, if you are interested in one particular field, you can look up the principal investigator of that field, you can connect with him, and you can become part of his team. Everybody in the world can become part of the ESA teams that do science on board of those instruments. This is, of course, for missions that are flown, so all the data is there, you can look at it. There is also the possibility to look into the future missions of ESA. Plato is the big one that is coming up, for example. You probably know about it because this is discussed a lot in the scientific community. Well, if you have students that are interested and say, I want to specialize in that field, I want to continue afterwards, do a PhD in that type of field, by all means they can contact the scientists that are working on those fields, and we are more than interested to have really an international team working on the science programs of ESA. This is in our mandate. This is what we absolutely want to do. ESA is a worldwide organization, and we are happy to work with everybody around the world.
Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Mariam Al-Rahbi. I'm a nutritionist. Actually, I want to ask you if you try to solve the problem of space pollution, and if we have the idea using robots, how we connect to you?
Space debris is a big problem. It's something that we absolutely need to start addressing, because if we continue, again, a little bit like on our planet, if we continue to use space the way that we have been using it for the last 50 years, maybe in 100 years it will become totally unusable. That is for sure. So how do we solve those problems? Today, ESA is also working on some demonstration missions to see how we could bring space debris back from orbit back to Earth, how we could re-enter it into the atmosphere. It's very complex because there is a lot. It's not very well known. It's expensive because if you have to launch a mission that costs hundreds of millions of euros just to capture a couple of kilograms of space debris, it's not going to be very successful. That is one. Secondly, we need to make sure that we do this again on an international level. There need to be agreements that, a little bit like we have now, I think in Europe at least, legislation that if you produce electronic equipment, you're obliged to take it back and you're obliged to recycle it. So we need to go to the same type of mechanism or legislation that any operator that launches a satellite is obliged to make sure that he doesn't generate debris and that the satellite comes back. And in that way you can share the cost and you can do a little bit more. So we are thinking about it. We are actively discussing with our prime industries in Europe to reduce space debris. It's extremely important. Again, I would just like to give an example that I learned last night from our colleagues of Vito. They had a ProbaV satellite that is actually doing vegetation on a permanent basis. One time per day, they visit the entire Earth and they map the entire vegetation on the Earth every single day. And just recently, I think last year, they had a miss of space debris of 6 meters. So space debris was flying next to their spacecraft, 6 meters distance. If it would have hit the spacecraft, we would have lost the spacecraft and we would have generated a lot more debris. So it's really a problem. It's also a problem for the ISS. During my flight, I had to take shelter once because we had space debris coming to the ISS. From time to time, we have to do debris avoidance maneuvers. We have to raise the orbit of the International Space Station in order to avoid it. So that we have to do. And the closest distance, again, that we had space debris passing the ISS was 100 meters. Now you have to see that the size of the ISS itself is larger than 100 meters. So it passed somewhere through the between the solar arrays. So it's really also a problem for the ISS. It's a danger for the crew.
Hi, my name is Wuthena. I'm from a private international school. I developed some discoveries and things about Einstein's theory of relativity regarding to, like, for example, if we have two twins, one traveled to space and one stayed at Earth. So they say that the one who will come back to Earth will be aged less than the one who stayed on Earth. So I just wanted to ask if you could explain more about this theory.
Explain? No, I'm not smart enough to explain it. I'm not Einstein. I really have to apologize for that. But it's true that the theory of Einstein, the relative theory, says that the faster you fly, the slower time goes. Actually, if you would have a clock and you would fly at the speed of the light, the clock would stand still. The time does not progress when you travel at the speed of light. It's very difficult to comprehend. I can say the words. That doesn't mean that I understand it. Again, I'm not clever enough for that. But it's a true statement. And actually, we use this theory. It's not like it's just a theory. It's fact, because our GPS satellites, Galileo satellites from Europe that fly around the Earth, their clocks are adjusted for that. Their clocks are running at a different speed than the clocks are running here on Earth. Because if we would not do that, then the signal that they would send would be off, and it would be, we would not be in 10 meters or 50 meters accuracy, but we would be in the kilometers of accuracy, and it would become totally useless. So it's not only that it's a theory, it's a fact, and we actually use these equations and the models that Einstein has created 100 years ago or more than 100 years ago, we use them today in our modern satellites. Applying this to me, I have calculated it once because the formulas are not so difficult if you put all the numbers. I have become 0.000001 second less aged because of my space flight than if I would not have flown. So I don't think it will make a big difference in my life.
Okay, just one more question. Like on the space or the surface of the moon, can we have the same gravitational force as we have on Earth? Like, can we equilibrium at the same level? Like, if it's possible that we can walk on the surface of the moon as same as we walk on the surface of Earth?
No, we cannot, because the levity of gravity at the moon is at 1/6. And this is why when you see astronauts from the Apollo mission walking on the moon, you see that they are kind of bouncing. And it's because every time that they step, well, they float a little bit higher, because they are only 1/6 of their weight when you're on the moon. When we will go to Mars, it's 1/3 of our weight that we will have. So the weight that we have is really dependent on the mass of the body on which we stand.
Yes, thank you.
Goedemorgen meneer. Dank u wel voor je tijd en visit. My name is Yaqdan Al-Zajjali. My question is, what kind of training, psychological training do you go through for ISS? Because it seems like it's so tight and there is no, it looks like a long winter. There is no sun, no tanning, no nothing.
Yes, we have some psychological training, but actually it starts before that. It starts with the selection. The most difficult part today when we do astronaut selections is the psychological profile. We absolutely have to make sure that people that are selected are not people that are very quickly angry. They need to be flexible. They need to be open to different culture. They need to be adaptable to a different environment. We don't need people on board of the space station then when something goes wrong or not according to their wishes start tweeting. This is not what we need, of course. So that is the first part. The second part, once that the astronauts are selected, we also train them. And we call this humor, performance, and behavior training. It's how to work in a group, how to live in a group, how to be a leader if you're the commander, but also how to be a follower if you're not the commander and to follow somebody ahead of you. So we all teach that. We also teach the people to take care of their personal space. Nothing gets more annoying in a small space station when you have somebody that does not take care of his personal space. What do I mean? If you're living at home and you're happily married like myself, and you leave your socks laying around on the sofa and a little bit there and a little bit there, it can be sometimes annoying. And your lovely wife can sometimes say, why are you leaving your socks? So looking, well, okay, and you clean them up and you put them away, but you love each other, and so you can move on, and then you go out and you have a dinner. When you leave your socks laying around in the space station, first of all, they can be very good friends, but you're still not in love with those people. Secondly, it becomes very rapidly very, very annoying to the other people. And so this is something that we learn, that you have to take care of your personal space. You have to always think, what am I doing? How is it going to influence the people around me? And this is a state of mind that you need to acquire. And this we do through human performance and behavior training. In ESA, for example, we have the CAVES program, where we put people for 6 days underneath in the caves, totally in the black. So it's a little bit like a space station. The environment is very challenging. They have to take care of their own resources, of their own waste all the time. And we put this in a multicultural environment. And not only with the people from the partnership that you have seen now. Last year we have implemented caves for the first time with our colleagues from China. China also has a space station, the Taikonauts, and we had 6 people, 2 Americans, a Japanese, a Russian, a European, and a Chinese, all working together for 6 days underneath the ground. And this is where we really teach the astronauts how to behave.
Sami Al-Harrasi, College of Nursing. I would like to ask regarding the research outcomes. Is there any promising research outcomes, particularly with those for osteoporosis?
For osteoporosis, we are making progress. We are not there yet. But what we have seen, because you know today, you're scientists as well, It's not tomorrow that you go to the lab and all of a sudden, eureka, and you have found something new. And it's building up on previous science, on papers that have been written, things that other people have done where you can add and you make progress like that. So to give you an example of osteoporosis, the initial results that we had was very promising. And so we have started developing a bigger program with mice to study that. In the last years, we had not 6 mice, but on a regular basis, 30 mice flying to orbit and doing research of them. And we are now thinking about a program where it's not only the space agencies and the scientists anymore, but it's now a pharmaceutical company that has picked it up and that has seen very promising results in the initial science. And we are going to fly a number of flights with 400 mice to the space station. Because of course, you know, if you develop new medication, you need to have statistics. It's not because 1 or 2 results that you can say, oh, I have found something. All medication or all medical research need to have a broad base of statistics. So that is one example on osteoporosis. I can give you another one on immunity, for example. We're making a lot of progress. For some reason, astronauts, when they fly to space and they come back from space, their immune system is about 2 to 3% of the immune system of normal people here on Earth. So for some reason, we don't understand why, because you have other people in stressy environments, people in submarines, for example, they can also not go out and whatever. For some reason, their immune system is not affected. Our immune system on orbit is very much affected. This is why astronauts have to go in quarantine. This is why when they come back from space for the first 3 weeks, they have a rehabilitation program where we try to keep them away from a lot of people and so on, because they are really weak in terms of immune system. And so also there we're trying to make progress. And of course, you know, this is also a very big disease, especially with elderly people that have very much deficiencies in immunity, which again brings an enormous cost to the medical systems, especially with an aging population, for example, in Europe. So also there we are making some breakthroughs. We have some research with Rolls-Royce, for example, on material science for engines of airplanes, that thanks to the research, they have been able to lower the weight of the engines and to increase the temperature at which the engines can operate, which means that they will consume less fuel, so it means that it's less CO2, but even much more important for all of us, the ticket price of the plane's flights will go down. So that's also interesting for us.
Saleh Shidani from SQ and Oman Astronomical Society. Thank you very much for this nearly virtual visit to the International Space Station. The second thing, can you kindly elaborate more in the current and the future ESA mission to observe the Earth and how that is so essential for the Earth Sustainability Program and so forth? And last question, can you, if our here student and members would like to go into space field, what do you think the fields in the near 10 years from now will be blooming and growing rapidly? Thank you.
Okay, so there were 3 questions. One was Earth observation, then the students, and what was the other one?
Yeah, the future expansion in the fields.
For Earth observation, yes. So in terms of the Earth observation, and the future of ESA programs are linked now in Earth observation a lot with the European Union and European Commission. We have the Sentinel program, or the Copernicus program, sorry, of which the Sentinel satellites are a big part. I think Sentinel-2 has now just been launched and there will be more satellite launched. The good part of this program is that all the data is free for the entire world. But it's not only about generating data per se, it's about creating added value from that data. And this is why we are here with our colleagues from VITO. Exactly, they are the specialists in that. Maybe, Steven, you want to say a couple of words? Please join me on stage, because it's always better to have specialists talking to you than to have an astronaut who does not know very much and then tries to repeat the wording. So, but the real value is you have terabytes and terabytes of data. And then we have now information systems that are very capable. And then you have the local environment where you can apply the products. And bringing those three together, this is where you create the added value. Steven.
Thank you, Frank. It feels a bit strange when an astronaut calls you a specialist, right? So, yes, indeed, like Frank mentioned, there is a technological advancement in remote sensing. We have the satellites up there are stronger, are more capable. They can see a lot more, not only in the visual spectrum, but also in other parts, other technologies like SAR satellites. So that's good. Today we can go with satellites that are circling around the globe at, let's say, between 600 and 800 kilometers. We can take pictures of 40 centimeter resolution on Earth. Yeah? So we can see an awful lot of things. Now, seeing things is one thing. I mean, maybe it gives you a nice screensaver on your laptop, but you need to derive information that is useful. And that's where, indeed, other technologies should join the remote sensing game. Yeah? If you have computer vision, if you have deep learning, if you have artificial intelligence, that's a bit like a very powerful engine to make use of that remote sensing data. But in order to make use of that remote sensing data that is applicable to you, your country, your city, whatever, you need to know the problems of your country and your city that you want to solve. Yeah? So, for instance, you can support real industries. We at Vito have developed something to monitor potatoes from space. The reason is that the potato industry is very powerful in Belgium. I don't know if you're familiar with French fries. Actually, they are made from Belgian potatoes. Yeah? So you can call them Belgian fries. But we watch them from space, not because we like that, we like fries, but because we are able to predict the yield of the potato fields so that the industry knows there is enough potatoes coming out of that. On top of that, potato is a rather sustainable food. If you have 1 square meter of potatoes, you can feed more people than 1 square meter of rice, for instance, and you consume less water, and there is less ethane that you produce. So potato is not only good for French fries, but it's also a more sustainable type of food. So we have a lot of countries, for instance, in Africa and Southeast Asia, that are looking into how can we promote the use of potatoes. And with remote sensing, we can support that. So it's exactly there, the remote sensing technology, the computer vision technology, combined with a domain where it can be applied. And if you put those three things together, that's where, as far as I'm concerned, the magic will happen. Because it's this multidisciplinary approach of solving problems. Okay?
Thank you very much, Steven. And yes, you're a real expert, so don't bother. The other question was, what are the promising fields? Well, this is a very promising field, I think. Earth observation, and it's also why the European Commission is investing a lot into Earth observation and remote sensing. We are only at the start. We will have more and more sensor technology that will see better and better pictures. We will have higher resolution. We have more spectra. Higher spectrum. I learned also from Steven that, for example, we are missing still some imagery in the thermal field, which could help us a lot in predicting other things. So this is certainly a very promising field where I think we are only at the start of the space economy. Space economy is indeed creating added value from space assets. Earth observation is certainly one of the fields. Other fields are more established, telecommunications, you know, but it's a market that will continue to grow. It's steady, it's there, but it will continue to grow. The launcher sector is today very dynamic. Of course, as you know, we have private actors coming on the launcher field, SpaceX in America. It's a very much changing environment. New countries that are developing their own launching capabilities. So where will this go? Reusability of launchers is certainly something that we will need if we want to bring the cost of space down. So it's also a promising field, but it's very competitive for the moment. And to be honest, I don't know exactly where it will go. Then, of course, we have the field of science, space science. I think we will always need space science. As I said, science is the core of the ESA program. It's because we do science program that we do things that are totally impossible to achieve, but yet because we have a goal, we try to achieve them. To give you an example, we have built instruments for the Herschel-Planck mission that operate at 1 degree Kelvin. 1 degree Kelvin. It's colder than any place in the universe. We have created that as human beings. And now for the next mission, we want to operate an instrument at 0.5 degree Kelvin. We don't know how to do that. It's impossible. But I'm sure that we will make it. Not tomorrow, but maybe in 10 years. And of course, all these technologies, all these science that come out from that will be used then for other applications like Earth observations, like other things where we then say, oh, now we have acquired this, now we can make use of it in the economy. Yeah? So space science for sure will be maintained a factor. And then the last part is of course the part that is a little bit for me, so that's why I kept it as the last, is exploration. For sure we will continue to explore. We are convinced of that. In Europe we have now established an exploration strategy and an exploration program that was voted by 22 ministers in our ministerial council last year in December 2016. And we basically have 3 targets. We have low Earth orbit, the International Space Station, but slowly transversing there as well to a space economy and giving up low Earth orbit more and more to the private sector. So we will still use it for science, of course, but we will not build all the systems anymore. We will purchase services to make sure that we can do the science activities that we want. The next step is beyond LEO, so further away from our planet, beyond low Earth orbit. Our target is the moon. And we are starting to discussing now with our colleagues from NASA, from Roscosmos and so on, to build a deep space gateway, a mini space station around the moon. We will do the first launch normally in 2022, 2023, and the phase 1 should be finished by 25, 26. And this is kind of a stepping stone to do lunar surface operations. We want to go, as Europe, we want to have sustainable exploration first and then exploitation of the moon. Our Director General has a vision which is called Moon Village. If some of you want to type it in Google once, you will see a lot of articles about it, of our Director General. It's actually where all communities from the entire planet, be it private sector, be it public sector, institutions, can come together and can do sustainable exploration of the moon. Now, we are not there yet, of course. We first need to be able to get there in a sustainable way. This is where our program is contributing. We are having missions together with our Russian colleagues to do survey of the moon, where we're going to build this moon base. But we will also have to do in-situ resource utilization. This is very much linked to the region here. The lunar surface is regolith, it's sand, basically. But there is water in that sand. There is volatiles in that sand, hydrogen, oxygen. How can we extract those resources from the lunar sand, from the lunar regolith, and use it in order to sustain life and sustainable exploration? So we have programs in ESA that are working on that. At the European Astronaut Center, we are creating a lunar habitat, a simulant lunar habitat, where we are going to focus a lot on that. Another factor in there is, for example, additive manufacturing. How can we use the lunar sand to automatically, with robots in additive manufacturing, build shelters for the astronauts, build landing platforms and things like that? So we are looking into that. And then the next step beyond that, of course, and sorry, I come back to the biology students here. Of course, when we have this lunar village, we will have to have recyclable systems in where we can have plant growth, in which we can have food production and so on. So we will need the biologists a lot in that aspect as well. And then the next step, of course, for us is Mars. Today we are flying to Mars with the ExoMars 2020 mission, trying to drill into Mars. Nobody has ever done that before. It will be the first time that we will take samples from about 1.5 meters under the ground. And again, here in the region, you know this very well, you can have a very thin top layer of sand, but when you go 1.5 meters down, you can find something completely different. So this is what we're trying to do. And then the next step is to bring back a sample from Mars. We will do that with our colleagues from NASA. We are studying this. The aim is to bring a sample back from Mars in 2026, 2027, so 10 years from now about. And it will be a very expensive mission, and we will try to bring 100 grams of Martian soil back to Earth for the scientists to imagine, to examine. So if you hear stories about humans on Mars, I plan to grow very old, to be honest. So I plan to live very, very long. And so I really hope that after seeing a first man on the moon, I can see a first woman on Mars. But it will not be soon, I can tell you. Bringing 100 grams back is already extremely difficult. So bringing people to Mars and safely bringing them back is not the immediate future.
I am المعتصم المعولي, a religious supervisor at SKU. It seems with my question I'm going to shift you to another dimension. Based on me being familiar with the scripture, I found some verses in the Quran in which they were reinterpreted by some interpreters of the Quran, which has astronomical references as they claim. So I want to check, double check the accuracy of their interpretation. There is a verse in which it reads in Arabic. I'll try to translate it in English. وَلَوْ فَتَحْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ بَابًا مِّنَ السَّمَاءِ لَظَلُّوا فِيهِ يَعْرُجُونَ لَقَالُوا إِنَّمَا سُكِّرَتْ أَبْصَارُنَا بَلْ نَحْنُ قَوْمٌ مَسْحُورُونَ, which means if we were to open a gate for them in the sky and they fly up to the sky in a lame way, they would say that we are blind because they see total darkness, as if this is magician. So as if this is magic. So they said the verse tells us that there are gates, like gates in the sky, which means you cannot fly up to the sky except from certain places. You penetrate the sky. And you need to fly in a lame way. You cannot fly up at 90 degrees vertically. So, and there is total darkness after the Earth atmosphere. So I want to check this interpretation and whether or not you're familiar. I'm curious to know about astronomical references in the scripture in general and in the Quran in particular.
To be very honest, of course, I'm not familiar with the Quran and with the astronomical references in there as well. For the same reasons, I'm also not familiar with what is written in the Bible. I was born and grown up as a Catholic. And yes, I think we need to see these scripts a little bit in historical reference. Today, we know that from any place on the Earth, you can fly to space. From some places, it's more difficult. I explained it in the North Pole because you don't have the velocity. On the equator, it's a lot easier to fly around the Earth. But certainly, it's demonstrated today that from any place on the planet, you can fly to space. This is one. Secondly, if you fly to space, it becomes dark. Yes, we have seen it on the pictures. Just above the atmosphere, the sky is dark. And if you look from the capsule upstairs, not to our planet, but up, it's total darkness. And when I asked one of my colleagues, Tim Kopra, when he did a spacewalk, and he went out of the door, he went out of the hatch during night, and he said it was the first thing that struck me so much, because when you're in this EVA suit, you can only see through a little window, because you're in the suit. Even if you turn your head, you're actually looking inside your spacesuit. You're not turning the whole spacesuit, so you have only a very little window to look out at, and so you don't see everything around you. And I said I came out, and the only thing I saw was pitch dark. I've never seen so much darkness in my life as during the moment that I came out of the space station, and it was actually a little bit scary at that moment, and he had to stop a little bit. That's actually what we do as well when people go outside of the EVA for the first time. The first 10 minutes, they do not have any work. The first 10 minutes are just to get accustomed to the environment and to take a deep breath and to say, okay, where am I? What am I doing? How are things going? So we have learned this from the past, that this is a very big psychological effect. But also from the inside, you see it that the sky is totally dark. And why is this? Because here the sky is blue because we have air. And air reflects the sunlight, and through the reflection of the sunlight we have the blue light of the sky. This is why when the sun is very low, the reflection is different, and then it becomes orange and red. Yeah? So, but once you are in space, there is no more air, so there is no more color, so everything is very dark. No, here all our rockets, as you see, they launch vertically. So you can launch vertically. Now, of course, in order to fly around the Earth, you cannot just fly up and that's it, and then fly, because then you will fall down again. The way that we fly around the Earth is by speed. That's why we need to have 8 kilometers per second. Basically what is happening is that you fly and you fall back to the Earth, but you fly so fast that you keep falling around the Earth. And this is microgravity. You basically have a permanent fall around the Earth.
Frank, we're running out of time, so what we'll do is we'll take the final two questions. One there and one from here.
One there. Hi, I'm so happy because with you, and this chance happens maybe one time during your life to sit with astronauts and to discuss. My question is, what's the last information you have about ozone layer? You know how much that affects our Earth. Regarding the updated information. Thank you very much.
Again, fortunately, I'm not a specialist. I don't know if you're also not atmospheric specialists. I know that we are doing a lot better with the ozone layer, but again, it's just from discussing with colleagues, so I'm not a specialist. I can only repeat the fact that we have, and this is the important part, I think, to take away from it. We were really destroying the ozone layer with all the chemicals that we were putting in our atmosphere. And this was understood through space. The ozone layer was discovered from space. We didn't discover it from the ground. It was discovered from space. So this gives you the importance again from remote sensing and from looking from a distance in order to be able to see something. So we discovered it from space. Then of course we did not know what was happening. So we had to do a lot of research on the Earth, not in space, but on the Earth to see what is happening. And there we saw that a lot of the chemicals that we had in the spray bottles at the time, CFKs, were responsible for breaking down the ozone layer. And we have passed legislation at the world level that these chemicals, we could not use them anymore. And we have seen that over the time, over the last 20 years, basically the atmosphere has recovered. And we are now back to the situation almost as we were before that time. So it means, again, that if we want to take action, and if we understand the problem, and we know where it's coming from, and there is a will to do something, that we can solve it. And this is the message that I want to give to climate change, about climate change. Yes, there is a problem. We need to understand it better. But we cannot say that we will solve the problem by, for example, lowering the standards of living, eating less, driving less cars, having less air conditioning. I don't believe that it will happen, because people want to have a good life. We also see the people in Africa, in other defavorized countries. We cannot say that they are not allowed to live at the same standard of living as we are. Who are we to say that, no, you can't do this and you can't do that, but we can because it's bad for the planet? Of course, we need to bring them up to the same standard of living as us. This is the only possible way to progress as humanity. But at the same time, we cannot do it in the same way that we are doing it now, because we will destroy our planet. So we need to understand, and we need to bring innovation. We need a lot of more young people, like biologists, astronomers, engineers, that can find the solutions to have a sustainable development of this planet. And this is actually a very good example, thanks for bringing this forward, a very good example that if we have the will to do something about it, and if we have the knowledge, and we have a lot of knowledge in this world, and if we have the political will, we can.
Last question.
Hello, my name is Noor. I have a question about NASA's mission, Juno mission. Can you tell us more about it?
Here again, unfortunately, I'm not a specialist. I know that it's, and I'm really not a specialist about the Juno mission. So I really have to sorry, because I don't want to give you answers that are not correct. So I really have to apologize.
All right, Frank, I'm going to take the opportunity, since I'm here, to ask you a simple question. I'm going to play the devil's advocate a little bit. Can you explain how the flag was moving on the moon landing video? The flag was moving on the moon landing video.
No, I cannot. I was asked also the question yesterday if the moon landing was real. For me, it's real. I can only say that I go to the Association of Astronaut Explorers. It's an association of astronauts. We meet once per year, and I've talked to people that walked on the moon. So the way that they told about their stories and that we exchange views, I can only say that for me it's absolutely real. But we will prove it in the future. We have the European Exploration Program, we have the Moon Village. We will go back to the moon, not to plant a flag, because I don't think it's important to plant a flag. There are enough flags planted around the planet. But we need to go there around the moon to together sustainable explore and exploit the moon and do science and do technology and get new knowledge. And we will do that. And once we are there, we will build the rover, and with the rover we will go to the flag and we will see why the flag is there and if it's there. So that is, I think, the best way to prove this.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, big round of applause for Frank Winne, please. Now, before we end the lecture today, Sultan Qابوس University would like to present a small token of appreciation for you being here. I'd please request the Vice Chancellor, Dr. Ali, to please come up. And since we already have them on stage, I think a group picture would be nice as well. Can the front row please join us on stage for a group picture? Yeah. Yeah, just a picture. Thank you very much. شكرا للحضور، نشكركم جميعا. Thank you, Frank. It was a pleasure having you.